The rain had been falling for hours, thin, relentless. The kind that seemed less like weather and more like punishment. The house was half lit, the windows fogged, and she was waiting by the door again. She always waited there when he was late. There was a ritual to it. The lights off, her coat still on, her hair pulled back too tightly. As if neatness could hold back the flood inside her. A single lamp glowed faintly in the hallway, and the shadows cut her face into fragments. She wasn't pacing. She didn't fidget. She just stood there, still, patient, terrifyingly composed. The clock on the wall ticked louder than the rain. "He's not coming," I said from the stairs. My voice came out quieter than I meant. She didn't turn around. "He always comes," she said. "Eventually." But we both knew that wasn't true anymore. She had been saying it for months, every time the dinners went cold. Every time the messages went unanswered. She said it with the calm certainty of someone who'd rather believe a lie than face silence. The sound of rain filled the space between us. I could see her reflection in the window, how her eyes kept scanning the street. How her fingers brushed the doorknob like it was a prayer. "Maybe you should sit down," I said. She smiled faintly, still not looking at me. "If I sit, I'll start thinking. If I think, I'll remember. And if I remember, I'll stop waiting." The words were so gentle they barely made a sound, but they hit hard. I wanted to tell her that he wasn't worth it. That the kind of man who made her wait in the dark didn't deserve her patience. But I didn't. Because I'd seen the way she looked at him, the way her love had started as devotion and decayed into obsession. She didn't love him anymore. She needed him, needed the waiting, needed the ache. It was the only thing that made her feel alive. The minutes bled into hours. Midnight came and went. She didn't move. Her shadow stretched long and thin across the floor. Almost reaching the door she refused to open. When the wind picked up, the old house groaned. The sound made her flinch, and for the first time, I saw her composure crack. "Maybe he got lost," she whispered. "Maybe he's trying." Her voice trembled, not with hope, but with the desperation of someone who'd already accepted the truth and couldn't bear to say it out loud. "Maybe," I said softly. The storm raged outside, drowning out everything. By the time dawn began to break, she was still there, eyes hollow. Lips pressed together like a secret she couldn't swallow. The rain had stopped, but she hadn't noticed. "He's not coming," I said again. This time, she turned. Slowly. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. "I know," she said. "That's why I have to keep waiting." I didn't understand then. Not fully. But now I think I do. For her, waiting wasn't weakness, it was defiance. It was her way of staying in control, of refusing to let the world decide when the story ended. If she waited, it meant there was still time. Still possibility. Still him. But he never came. And when the morning light finally crept across the floor, she stepped back from the window. Took off her coat and walked away. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She simply turned off the lamp, and for the first time, the dark didn't look like waiting anymore. It looked like acceptance. By the next evening, the house had the stillness of something holding its breath. She hadn't left the front room all day. The chair near the door sat slightly askew from where she'd dragged it closer to the window. As if proximity could summon him. I stood in the doorway, watching her. The only light came from a single candle she'd placed on the table beside her. Its flame trembling with every small draft. Her face flickered between shadow and gold, making her look like two people at once, the woman who had loved him, and the woman who was trying to forget she ever did. She didn't look at me when she said, "He's late again." "He's not coming," I replied, my voice flat, careful. She smiled faintly, almost kindly. "You said that yesterday." "Yesterday, you believed me less." That made her glance up. For a moment, her eyes met mine, sharp, searching, full of something between defiance and pleading. "You think I don't know?" she said softly. "You think I can't feel it?" I didn't answer. She turned back to the window. Outside, the rain had begun again, softer now. Like it was ashamed of itself. "There's a kind of cruelty," she said, "in someone teaching you how to wait and then punishing you for doing it." Her voice was calm, but her fingers were white around the arm of the chair. I could hear the faint tremor in her breath. The kind that comes from a heart that's been whispering the same lie for too long. "You could stop," I said. "You don't have to keep waiting." She shook her head slowly. "If I stop, he wins." "Wins what?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "The story. The ending. I won't give him that." It was such a strange thing to hear, that even her grief had become a form of revenge. She wasn't waiting for love anymore. She was waiting to outlast him. To prove that she could. Hours passed like that, her in silence, me pretending not to watch. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward the window, listening for a car that would never come. The candle burned lower, the wax pooling like melted time. At one point, she murmured something I almost didn't catch. "He told me once that I looked my best when I was waiting for him." I stared at her. "That's not love." "No," she said, her eyes on the flame. "It's vanity. But it's all he ever gave me. So I learned to make it enough." Her tone was too steady, too practiced. Like someone reading a line from a script they'd long since memorized. When the clock struck midnight, she finally stood. The candle had burned down to nothing. She blew out the last flame and turned toward the stairs. "Tomorrow?" I asked quietly. She paused. "If I stop waiting tomorrow," she said, "what will I do with tonight?" And then she was gone, her footsteps soft against the floorboards, fading into the kind of silence that doesn't want to be disturbed. I stayed where I was for a long time, staring at the dark window, half expecting her reflection to reappear. It didn't. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, rhythmic, endless. It was the only thing left that still knew how to keep her company. The next morning, the world was washed in that dim gray light that makes everything look unfinished. I found her in the kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes, her hair unpinned, eyes red-rimmed but dry. She had brewed a pot of coffee she wasn't drinking. "He didn't call," she said before I could speak. I didn't bother pretending to be surprised. "You knew he wouldn't." She nodded slowly, staring at the steam curling from her cup. "It's strange," she said, "how quickly silence becomes familiar. You start to mistake it for peace." Her voice was even, too even. It was the voice of someone who'd rehearsed composure so long it had become second nature. I sat across from her, the chair creaking slightly under my weight. "You can't keep doing this," I said. "You can't keep waiting for someone who's already gone." She looked up at me then, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time in months. "Gone?" she repeated softly. "No, not gone. Just cruel enough to stay present in absence." It was such a simple sentence, but it landed like a stone. She was right. He hadn't disappeared. He still lingered, in the mail that came addressed to both of them, in the empty space at the dinner table, in the way she still set 2 cups of coffee every morning out of habit. He was gone, but he wasn't absent. "Do you hate him?" I asked quietly. She thought about it. "No," she said finally. You can't hate someone you built your life around. You can only grieve them differently each day. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the cup to her lips. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy. The kind of gray that pressed down on the world. She followed my gaze to the window and said, "When you've loved someone long enough, even the weather starts to sound like their footsteps." There was no self-pity in her tone, just exhaustion. I wanted to reach out, to tell her she deserved more than a lifetime spent waiting for ghosts. But something in her expression stopped me. It wasn't despair, it was devotion twisted into something unrecognizable. Something too old and too deep to uproot. "You think this is weakness," she said suddenly. "But waiting is the only power I have left." He taught me that. "How?" I asked. She smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "He made me small. And when you make someone small, you forget they can still haunt you. That's what waiting does, it haunts. It keeps you alive in the places they'd rather forget." The way she said it chilled me. It wasn't love anymore. It was endurance. A form of survival so quiet it could almost pass for devotion. She set her cup down gently, the sound echoing in the stillness. "He'll come back," she said, but her voice was softer now, less certain. "Men like him always do. Not because they miss you, but because they want to see if you're still there." "And will you be?" I asked. She looked at me for a long time before answering. "Yes," she said finally. "But not for him." The words didn't make sense at first. But then I saw it, the shift in her eyes, small but unmistakable. It wasn't hope anymore. It was something colder, sharper. She wasn't waiting for love. She was waiting for the moment she no longer needed it. When I left the kitchen, she was still sitting there, staring into her untouched coffee. The steam fading into nothing. And for the first time, I realized the waiting wasn't breaking her anymore. It was remaking her into something quiet, patient, and dangerous. That evening, the air felt heavy again, but not because of the rain. The storm had passed. It was her silence that filled the house now, thick and unmoving. Every clock ticked too loudly. Every shadow seemed to stretch just a little too long. She had moved back to her spot by the window, the same chair, the same posture. But something in her was different. She wasn't looking for him anymore. She was studying the darkness, like it had something left to teach her. I stood in the doorway for a while before speaking. "You're still waiting." She didn't flinch. "Habit," she said. "You can't unlearn it overnight." There was no sorrow in her tone this time. Just calm acknowledgement, the sound of someone who had finally accepted the rules of her own undoing. The light from the street lamp outside flickered against her face, outlining her features in pale gold. Her expression was unreadable, something between serenity and resignation. "When he comes back," she said suddenly, "I won't open the door." The words startled me. "You mean if he comes back?" She turned her head slightly, and a faint smile touched her lips. "No," she said. "When?" There was no hope in it, just certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from knowing someone too well. I wanted to ask why she still believed in his return. Why she was willing to endure the endless ache of waiting just to deny him entry. But I already knew the answer. It wasn't love anymore. It was reclamation. She had been living inside his absence for so long that she'd turned it into a kind of ownership. If he never came back, she could keep waiting and make that her story. If he did, she could deny him, and that would be her victory. Either way, she won. "You think he deserves your forgiveness?" I asked. Her eyes flicked toward me, calm, sharp, and strangely kind. "Forgiveness is just another form of waiting," she said. And I'm done giving him both. I didn't know what to say. There was something chillingly beautiful in the way she said it. Not cruel, not bitter, just final. She turned back to the window, her reflection merging with the dark outside. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said, almost absently, "You know what the cruelest thing is? He'll never realize I stopped waiting. He'll think I just waited too long." The clock ticked again, slow and deliberate. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, its headlights cutting across the curtains for a brief second. She didn't move. "I thought love was supposed to be mercy," I said quietly. "It is," she replied. "Until it isn't. Then it becomes memory. And memory doesn't forgive." Her voice carried that soft certainty again. That unnerving stillness of someone who has learned to love the burn because it reminds them they once felt something real. As I turned to leave, she said one last thing, so softly I almost missed it. "People talk about heartbreak like it's the end," she murmured. "But the truth is, heartbreak is just another kind of waiting, only this time for yourself to come back." And when I looked at her again, she wasn't the woman who had stood by the door night after night, desperate for a sound that never came. She was something else now, something whole, dangerous, and free in her own quiet way. The lamp beside her flickered once, then went out, leaving her face lit only by the faint glow of the streetlight. And for the first time, the dark didn't look like abandonment, it looked like her. By the time the week ended, the waiting was over, not because he came back, but because she stopped needing him to. I found her outside that morning, standing barefoot on the porch. The sky pale and empty after the long stretch of rain. The air smelled clean, but she didn't look at the world like someone seeing something new. She looked at it like someone remembering something old. She wasn't dressed for the cold. Her hair was unbound, her coat open. The wind caught it, and for a second she looked untethered. Almost otherworldly, like she'd been carved out of everything she'd endured and left standing by sheer will. "He's not coming," I said softly. She nodded. "I know." There was no tremor in her voice, no ache. Just calm, like a prayer finally answered. "Then why are you still out here?" I asked. She looked at the road, the long curve disappearing into the distance. "Because this is where I lost him," she said, "and where I decided to stop looking." The simplicity of it caught me off guard. There was no drama in her words, no bitterness. Just truth. "When he left," she continued, "I thought the silence he left behind was punishment. I thought it meant I wasn't enough. But it wasn't punishment, it was space. I just didn't know what to do with it yet." I watched her as she turned her hand over in the cold air, as if testing whether the wind could still touch her. "Do you miss him?" I asked. She smiled, slow and tired but genuine. "No," she said. "I miss who I was when I believed waiting could change something." That hit harder than anything else she'd ever said. Inside, the house was quiet, stripped of the tension that had haunted it for so long. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, but it didn't sound oppressive anymore. It just sounded like time again. When she finally came in, she didn't look back at the door. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and watched the steam rise until it vanished. Then she said, almost absently, "It's strange how easy it is to confuse devotion with disappearance. I kept waiting for him so I wouldn't have to see how much of me had already left with him." She traced a small ring of condensation on the table with her fingertip, her expression unreadable. "I don't think I loved him," she said finally. "I think I loved the idea that love could fix things. That if I just held on long enough, the story would find its way back to me. Her voice softened. But stories don't come back. You have to write new ones. I wanted to ask what that meant, what she'd do now, but she stood before I could. She took her coat from the back of the chair, draped it over her arm, and walked toward the door, not to wait, but to leave. Where will you go? I asked. She paused, her hand on the frame. Anywhere, she said. Everywhere. It doesn't matter anymore. The waiting's over. And with that, she stepped outside. The door closed quietly behind her, but it didn't sound like loss this time. It sounded like release. I stood there for a while, staring at the empty chair by the window. The faint outline of her reflection still ghosting the glass. He never came back, but somehow, that was the ending she'd been waiting for all along. Because sometimes, revenge isn't destruction, it's learning how to walk away first.